Have you ever made a decision so fast, so instinctively, that you didn't even stop to ask why? Like you just judged someone in a blink, walked past them, maybe even looked down on them, without realizing how that one moment, that single choice, could rewrite your whole story? Let me ask you something, and be honest. If a tired, messy-looking woman came up to you at a gas station with a child in tow, asked for a few bucks for food, would you help her? Or would you do what most people do, pretend not to see, turn away, maybe even judge her for not having her life together? What if I told you the man in this story did exactly that? He saw a struggling mother right there in front of him, and he walked away without a second thought. And what he didn't know, what you don't know yet, is who she really was and why helping her could have changed everything. Now I want you to stay with me, because in this video, I'm not just telling you a story. You're going to feel like you're in it. You're going to feel what he felt when the truth hit him, like a truck. And trust me, this is one of those stories where the ending changes how you see the beginning. It's not just about one man's mistake. It's about all of us. How quick we are to judge. How fast we move past people we don't understand. And how, sometimes, life gives us a moment to do the right thing, and if we miss it, we pay a price way bigger than we could imagine. So, stick around, because I promise you, by the end of the story, you'll get the answer that brought you here. The one you have to know: who is she? And why did it matter so much? What secret was hiding behind that worn-out hoodie, those tired eyes, and the little boy holding her hand? And here's the twist. This isn't just her story. It's his. The man who refused to help. And trust me, he's going to learn a lesson the hard way. Before we dive into it, let me say this: we all like to think we'd do the right thing, that we'd help someone in need. But when it really happens, when we're running late or tired or annoyed, do we still step up? Or do we do what's easy? That's why this story is going to make you think. It's going to challenge how you see people. And maybe it'll remind us what it means to be human. All right, let's set the scene. It was one of those chilly spring mornings, the kind where the air still bites a little and everything feels just a little rushed. The city was just waking up, the sun barely stretching over the skyline, and traffic was already starting to back up at the intersections. You know that moment when life is loud but you're numb to it? That's where we start. Our main character, Jason, 38 years old, divorced, self-made, always in a hurry. The type of guy who measures success by the hour, not the heart. He wasn't cruel, not really. But he was tired. Tired of excuses. Tired of being asked for things. Tired of a world that, in his mind, just needed to work harder. Jason had his earbuds in, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, and plans in his head that did not include any interruptions. Especially not the kind that came from strangers. And then he saw her. She wasn't begging. Not exactly. She stood just a few feet from the gas station entrance, hands in the pockets of a worn-out coat, her little boy sitting on a cracked curb beside her, staring down at his shoes. She made eye contact with Jason, soft but firm, and stepped forward, not aggressively, but with a kind of silent strength, like she hated asking, but had no choice. "Excuse me," she said, voice low, holding back emotion. "I hate to ask, but do you have a few dollars? My son hasn't eaten since yesterday." Now pause here with me for a second. Really feel this moment. Think about how you'd react. Jason didn't look angry. He didn't curse her out. He didn't even say anything at all. He just looked her up and down, saw the dirt on her sleeves, the cheap sneakers on her kid, the desperation in her voice, and then he turned his shoulder, walked past her and muttered, "Sorry, not today." Like she was a flyer someone tried to hand him on the street. Like her struggle was just background noise. And just like that, she disappeared from his mind. But the universe, it doesn't let moments like that go unpaid for. Jason got back in his car, blasted the heater, scrolled through his messages, and drove off like nothing happened. But what he didn't know was that this wasn't the last time he'd see her. In fact, he was going to see her again very soon in a place he never expected. And when he did, everything he thought he knew about her, about himself, was going to shatter. Now I want you to really lock in with me here. Because from this point on, everything changes. This is the part of the story where the questions start burning. Who is she? Why is she really there? What is her connection to Jason? And why does he end up being the one who needs her? And before you skip or swipe away thinking you know how this ends, you don't. This isn't one of those predictable, feel-good stories where someone gives money, gets a smile, and walks off feeling good.
No.
This story hurts before it heals. There's a twist coming that will stop you in your tracks. And the payoff? Let's just say it'll make you rethink the way you see strangers forever. So, if you've ever felt invisible, or if you've ever made someone else feel that way, this story is for you. Now, let me tell you what happened next. Jason pulled into his office building downtown, sleek, modern, everything designed to keep the outside world out. He had meetings lined up all day, big clients, big decisions. But there was one meeting on the calendar that wasn't familiar. A last-minute replacement. Someone new. A woman. All the invite said was her first name, Samantha. He didn't think twice about it. Not until he walked into the boardroom, straightened his tie, opened the door, and locked eyes with her. The same woman from the gas station. Only now, she wasn't wearing a hoodie. She was in a sharp blazer, hair clean and brushed back, sitting at the head of the table like she belonged there. And the look she gave him, not angry, not smug,
Just calm.
like she already knew how this was going to go. And right there, before he could even sit down, before he could process how the woman he ignored this morning ended up here, staring at him across $1 billion deal, she said one thing. Do you remember me? And now, Jason's world starts to crack. Jason stood frozen in the doorway, fingers still wrapped around the sleek steel handle, his heart skipping a beat as the quiet hum of the boardroom surrounded him. The other team members were already seated, half glancing at their phones, shuffling notes, sipping overpriced lattes, completely unaware of the silent tension vibrating in the space between him and the woman at the head of the table. It wasn't just the shock of seeing her here. It was the way she looked so completely different, like two versions of a person that couldn't possibly be the same. But they were. He knew it. The face from the gas station that morning, the one he brushed off like a minor inconvenience, was now staring back at him with a calm, unreadable expression, waiting to see if he would connect the dots out loud. And part of him wanted to deny it, play it off like he didn't recognize her, like she wasn't the same woman who stood in the cold asking him for help. But deep down, Jason wasn't just shaken. He was unsettled. Because what she said next hit him harder than anything he'd heard in months. We've met before. Briefly. The room kept moving like nothing was out of place, but Jason's mind began to swirl. How did she get here? Was this some kind of setup? A test? He pulled out his chair, sat down slower than usual, trying to regain his composure, while everything inside him screamed for answers. He knew his company was in the middle of a high-stakes merger, the kind that could make or break reputations, and Samantha, if that really was her name, was introduced as the lead consultant representing the other side. But none of this added up. Jason had spent the past 6 weeks putting out fires, flying coast to coast, pitching deals, trying to smooth over the fallout from a messy breakup with a former business partner who'd accused him of cutting corners. He thought he had everything under control. But now, as Samantha began her presentation with grace and clarity, he couldn't stop staring at her. Her confidence, her poise, her polished delivery, it didn't match the woman from earlier. And yet he knew it was her. Maybe this was karma, he thought. Maybe this was life, trying to humble him in the most brutal way possible. Because lately, everything in Jason's world had started to shift. His relationship with his teenage daughter had grown cold, their conversations now just strange check-ins and shallow texts. His parents had stopped calling too, tired of his excuses for missing family dinners and birthdays. He'd chalked it all up to ambition, told himself that success came with sacrifices, but as he sat there listening to Samantha speak with effortless command, something deeper started to stir. What if he hadn't just ignored a woman in need that morning? What if he'd ignored a sign? What if this meeting wasn't just business, it was personal? And still, the questions kept multiplying. How did she go from panhandling to a conference room in less than 12 hours? Was she part of some social experiment, one of those YouTube videos where people test the kindness of strangers? Jason's company was big enough to attract media attention, and the idea that he might have been caught on camera treating someone like they didn't matter, that could ruin everything. But there was something in her eyes that said this wasn't about revenge or going viral. It felt more complex than that, like she wasn't here to shame him, but she wasn't about to let him off the hook either. After the meeting, Jason barely heard what anyone said. The usual handshakes and pleasantries felt robotic. All he could focus on was finding a way to talk to her, to get some kind of clarity. But Samantha disappeared the moment the session ended, slipped away with her assistant, a tight-lipped guy in a navy suit who looked like he used to be a federal agent or something. Jason tried to follow, but by the time he made it to the elevator bank, she was already gone. And now the mystery thickened. That night, Jason couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment over and over. The way she looked at him, the quiet edge in her voice, the way she seemed to hold all the power in a room he usually dominated. He started Googling her name, trying to find anything that could explain what he saw. Samantha, just Samantha, was too common. No last name on the meeting invite. No company bio. No social media accounts that matched her face. It was like she didn't exist until today. And the more he searched, the more uncomfortable he became. This wasn't just someone who came from nowhere. This was someone who was keeping a part of her story hidden on purpose. Jason's mind wandered to the possibility that maybe she had a hidden agenda. He thought about all the people who might want to see him fall, from former employees he'd let go, to competitors who'd lost out on deals, to even the ex-business partner who'd once warned him, "One day, you'll be the one asking for help and no one will show up." Was Samantha connected to one of them? Was this all orchestrated to make him sweat, make him question himself, shake his confidence before a deal that could define his legacy? But then there was another possibility, one he didn't want to admit. What if he had seen her before, not just that morning? What if she wasn't just a stranger? Because there was something oddly familiar about her voice. Something in the way she spoke that stirred an old memory, something buried deep under years of business meetings and broken connections. And that's when the real unease set in, not just the fear that he was being exposed, but the fear that he had forgotten something important. Or someone. As the days passed, Jason tried to carry on like nothing was wrong, but the tension kept building. Every time he stepped into the office, he found himself looking over his shoulder, waiting for another twist. He asked his assistant to dig up any information on the consulting firm that brought Samantha in, but strangely, there was no clear paper trail. No online footprint. Just a shell name and a few vague details. The kind of thing that looked real on the surface, but didn't hold up under scrutiny. And that's when a new thought crept in. What if Samantha wasn't working with the firm? What if she had inserted herself into the process? What if she had a reason to be close to him, and this merger was just her way in? The uncertainty gnawed at him. He began questioning his team, subtly probing during meetings, trying to figure out who had invited her, who had spoken with her first, but nobody seemed to know. It was like she appeared out of thin air, already in motion, and everyone just accepted her as part of the deal. Even worse, she kept everything strictly professional. No hints, no winks, no callbacks to the gas station. It was driving him mad. Because Jason knew something wasn't right, but he had no proof, no one to confide in, and no idea where this was going. And then, just when he thought it couldn't get more strange, something happened that threw everything off balance. Jason came home late one evening after a brutal day of failed calls and missed meetings, and found a small envelope taped to his door. No name, just his address, typed in a plain font. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, clearly taken years ago. A photo of Jason, much younger, smiling at a woman. And not just any woman, Samantha. But she looked different. Younger, softer, maybe early 20s. And beside her in the photo was a man Jason didn't recognize. But they were all standing together. Like friends. Or something more. Now the past wasn't just knocking, it was breaking down the door. Jason stared at the photo for what felt like hours, trying to remember where it was taken, when, how he knew her. But nothing came. Just fragments. Vague feelings. And the deep, sinking certainty that Samantha knew everything about him, while he couldn't even remember her name. And that's when the next message arrived. This time it wasn't in an envelope. It was a voicemail. Her voice. "You still don't remember me. but you will. And when you do, you'll understand why I needed you to say yes. Then the line went dead. And that's when Jason realized this wasn't about business anymore. This was about something he'd forgotten. Or maybe something he chose to forget. And now, the truth was coming for him, whether he was ready or not. Jason didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dim light of his home office, the photograph lying flat on the desk like a piece of evidence in a case he couldn't solve. Every few minutes he would glance at it again, hoping something new would emerge, some detail, some familiar background, some thread to tug on. But nothing came. It was the same three people in grayscale, frozen in time. Him, Samantha, and that unidentified man whose face stirred no recognition, yet felt uncomfortably close, like a dream he'd had once and forgotten by morning. The voicemail echoed in his head. You still don't remember me, but you will. And when you do, you'll understand why I needed you to say yes. It wasn't just haunting, it was a warning. And Jason couldn't shake the feeling that this was no longer just about guilt, or even redemption. Something darker was unraveling here, and it was just getting started. By mid-morning the next day, Jason arrived at his office early, hours before anyone else. He needed space, time to piece things together before the day swallowed him. But the moment he stepped off the elevator, he knew something was off. His assistant, Lisa, loyal, meticulous, the kind of person who left post-it notes on everything and color-coded his life, was already there, which was unusual. Her eyes were wide, her posture stiff, and the moment she saw Jason, she stood up too fast, knocking her coffee across the desk. Jason, I think you need to see this, she said, her voice low and trembling, like she was trying not to panic. She handed him an envelope, identical to the one he received the night before. No return address. Same basic font. Same weight. And inside, another photo. This time it wasn't of Jason. It was of her, Lisa, taken without her knowledge, clearly recent, blurry but unmistakable. She was standing outside her apartment complex, phone in hand, purse slung over her shoulder. The photo was taken from across the street. Someone had been watching her. Jason's blood ran cold. Along with the photo was a single line typed neatly on a strip of paper. Loyalty is dangerous when you don't know the full story. This wasn't just about him anymore. Jason stared at the message, trying to make sense of what was happening. If someone was targeting Lisa, someone close to him, it meant this wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just a reckoning for something he did. It was a game, and everyone around him was now a piece on the board. He asked Lisa if she'd told anyone about the meeting with Samantha or mentioned the photo he'd received. She shook her head, eyes filled with fear, but also confusion. Jason, I thought you were just stressed, but who is doing this? What's going on? He didn't have an answer. All he had was a gut feeling that Samantha wasn't working alone, and that whoever was behind this wanted to control the narrative from the shadows. He told Lisa to stay home for the rest of the day, to keep her head down and not talk about what happened to anyone. She hesitated, but nodded, and left quickly, clutching the envelope like it might explode. The deeper Jason got, the more the lines began to blur. Suddenly, the people he trusted most felt like potential liabilities. Every interaction at work seemed to carry an edge. Was someone feeding information to Samantha? Was there someone inside his company who had a stake in this? He remembered the man in the photo, the one beside Samantha, and began wondering if he was connected to his former business partner, Daniel Reyes, a man Jason hadn't spoken to in almost 2 years. Their partnership had ended in flames, with lawsuits, accusations, and silence. Jason always told himself he made the right call, cutting ties before Daniel's risky side deals tanked the company. But what if Daniel wasn't working alone back then? What if Samantha had been there too, watching, waiting, planning something from the background? Needing answers, Jason pulled up every file, email thread, and contract from the years he and Daniel worked together. He scoured names, faces, events, anything that might link to Samantha. And that's when he found something buried in the back end of an old payroll system, a temporary consultant listed under a different name, hired during one of their international development phases nearly 6 years ago. The photo ID attached was fuzzy, but Jason's heart skipped when he saw it. The woman in the photo looked like a younger Samantha, but her name was listed as Elena Moore. Same eyes. Same jawline. Different name. Jason stared at the screen, trying to piece it together. If Samantha had worked for the company years ago under an alias, it meant she'd been watching his operation longer than he realized.
But why?
What did she see back then that made her come back now? And why all the secrecy? Was this about revenge for something that happened on the job? Did he fire her without knowing it? Did Daniel? The questions kept piling up, but the timeline still didn't add up. He hadn't recognized her at all until the gas station, and even then, it was only later, in that boardroom, that her presence hit him like a storm. And now this mystery name, Elena Moore, felt like the missing puzzle piece he couldn't quite fit. If she'd been in the system before, why go through so much trouble now to disguise her identity, to pose as someone in need, then appear in a high-profile merger as a consultant with no trackable background? Something didn't feel right. Jason began to suspect there were two stories running side by side, one about Samantha's identity and one about whoever was sending the photos and voicemails. Because now, he wasn't convinced they were the same person. Samantha's confrontation was surgical, precise, emotional in a way that felt personal. But the message Lisa received, that was colder, more calculated. Like someone else had a stake in this, someone who wanted to escalate the fear and make it bigger than just Jason's guilt. It felt orchestrated, almost too perfect. That night, he sat in his living room in complete darkness, the city lights flickering outside his window, his mind unraveling with possibilities. He couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched, not just by someone, but by multiple someones, each with their own agenda. Samantha might be at the center of it, but she wasn't alone. And the more he pulled at the threads, the more tangled everything became. Then, as if the universe wanted to confirm his fears, his phone buzzed with a new message. No name, no number, just a link to a video file. He hesitated before opening it, and what he saw next made his skin crawl. It was security camera footage, low resolution, time-stamped, silent. The angle showed the entrance to a coffee shop he visited frequently, and walking into frame was Jason himself from earlier that week. But the camera didn't follow him. It stayed focused on a figure sitting at a table near the window. A woman, Samantha, watching him the entire time. She never approached, never moved, just watched. And at the end of the clip, a man walked up behind her, whispered something in her ear, and handed her a flash drive. Jason paused the video. It was the same man from the photo. The unknown connection. And suddenly, nothing felt like coincidence anymore. Jason's hands trembled slightly as he paused the video, staring at the still frame of the man handing Samantha the flash drive. Something about the man's posture, calm, deliberate, felt deeply unsettling, like he wasn't just passing along data, but setting something irreversible in motion. Jason enlarged the frame, hoping to catch a clearer image of the man's face, but the resolution was too grainy. Still, there was something eerily familiar about his silhouette, the way he leaned in close, like he wasn't just part of this, he was orchestrating it. Jason's heart pounded in his chest, not just from fear but from a creeping suspicion he hadn't allowed himself to entertain until now. What if this entire thing wasn't about guilt, or payback, or even a secret from the past? What if it was a setup, one he'd been walking into piece by piece without realizing? With adrenaline clouding his judgment, Jason drove straight to the one person who had been with him since the beginning of his corporate climb, Daniel Reyes. After their fallout, they hadn't spoken a word, but something deep in Jason's gut told him that if anyone could explain the man in the photo, or Samantha's reappearance, it would be him. He found Daniel at a quiet bar on the edge of the city, the kind of place that hadn't changed since 1995, dim, smoky, and cash only. Daniel looked older than Jason remembered, like the last couple years had weighed heavy on him, but when he saw Jason, he didn't look angry. He looked amused, like he'd been waiting for this visit. Jason wasted no time. He showed him the photo, the video, asked point blank if he knew who the man was. Daniel leaned back, took a sip of his drink and smirked. "You really don't remember, do you?" he said, almost pitying. "That's not just some guy. That's your brother." The words hit Jason like a hammer to the chest. He blinked, unsure he'd heard right. What are you talking about? I don't have a brother. Daniel shook his head slowly. You did. Half-brother. Your dad had a kid before he met your mom. Quiet arrangement. Whole thing was kept hush. He tried to bring him around once back in college, remember? You stormed out of the house. Said you didn't want anything to do with him. You buried that whole memory, didn't you? Guess what? He didn't forget. Jason felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. A memory he'd long suppressed cracked open like a vault. One blurry summer night, a dinner that ended in shouting, his father's desperate attempts to convince him that family was complicated but worth fighting for. Jason, too proud, too angry, too young, had walked out and never looked back. He had completely erased the encounter from his mind, convinced it didn't matter. And now, here it was, crawling back from the shadows of his past with teeth. Daniel continued, voice quieter now. Your brother's name is Marcus. He changed it after your dad passed. Went dark for a while, disappeared off the grid. But about a year ago, he started asking questions about you, your business, the money. I didn't help him. Didn't think it was my place. But he was determined.
Said you owed him something.
Said it wasn't about the money. It was about the truth. Jason staggered back slightly, processing the bomb Daniel had just dropped. All this time, he thought Samantha was the one pulling strings. But what if she wasn't the mastermind? What if she was just a piece of someone else's puzzle, someone with a much deeper vendetta? The story was unraveling, fast. The messages, the photo, the strange consulting deal, Samantha's identity. It had all felt personal, but not like this. Not family. Not blood. Jason thought he was dealing with a stranger holding a grudge, but now he realized he'd been caught in something far more intimate. Marcus hadn't just been watching him. He'd been building a case.
And Samantha?
She wasn't random. She was involved, yes, but maybe not for the reasons Jason assumed. Maybe she wasn't seeking revenge for being ignored at the gas station. Maybe that whole moment was staged. A test. A trigger. A way to see if Jason had changed at all, or if he was still the same self-absorbed man who turned his back on the people who needed him most. As Jason drove home, the weight of it all crashed down. He wasn't just being haunted by his past. He was being judged by it. Every mistake, every choice he thought he'd buried under success, was now resurfacing. But one thing still didn't make sense. If Marcus was behind all this, why now? Why come after him through a proxy, like Samantha? Why the theatrics? When he arrived at his apartment building, the doorman handed him a small box. No label, no postage, just his name scrawled across the top. Inside was an old camcorder tape and a note that read, "You should have listened to Dad." Jason stared at the tape, palms sweating. He hadn't seen a camcorder in years. Who even owned one anymore? But as he held it, a memory flickered. His father used to record family holidays on a camera just like this. Jason had hated being filmed, always turned away, scowled at the lens. He'd forgotten how often his father tried to capture memories, moments he thought mattered. Maybe he knew even back then that Jason would try to forget them. Jason didn't have a way to play the tape, not anymore. So, he did something he never thought he'd do. He called his mother. They hadn't spoken in nearly a year, ever since a blow-up over his missing another Thanksgiving. She didn't sound angry when she answered, just tired. But when Jason asked if she still had the old camcorder, she didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. "But Jason, why are you asking about that now?" He didn't answer. He just said he was coming over. And in the back of his mind, one thought kept repeating like a warning he couldn't ignore. What's on that tape might change everything I thought I knew, not just about Samantha, or Marcus, or the past, but about myself. The sky had turned a heavy steel gray by the time Jason pulled into his mother's driveway, the clouds rolling in like a warning. The neighborhood looked exactly as he remembered, quiet, tucked away, the kind of place where the air felt slower and time seemed to stall. But Jason was anything but calm. As he sat in the car for a few long moments, the camcorder tape still clutched in his hand, he could feel the dread building in his chest. This wasn't just about unlocking a hidden memory anymore. This was about facing something he had run from for most of his adult life. The wreckage of his choices, the cold truths buried beneath polished success, and the consequences now threatening to spill over and take everything with them. He finally stepped out, made his way to the front door, and before he could knock, it opened. His mother stood there, older than he remembered, eyes still sharp, mouth tight with worry. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him the way only a mother can, like she saw past the man into the child still hiding behind his suit. Inside, she dusted off the old camcorder like it was some fragile relic, popping in the tape with a click that felt too final. The screen flickered, static hummed, and then a grainy image appeared. Jason's father, smiling, waving at the camera from the front porch. The date stamped in the corner was from the summer Jason turned 20. What followed was a string of mundane clips: barbecue chatter, lawn chairs, kids running through sprinklers. Then it shifted. The camera turned shakily indoors, filming without ceremony. His father's voice came from off-screen, low, uncertain. "They've just left. I'm filming this because I don't know how else to say it." The screen tilted toward a table where 2 envelopes Saturday. "If something happens to me, Jason needs to see this." I tried to tell him. He wouldn't listen. Jason's pulse spiked. His father looked into the lens, eyes tired. "He has a brother, Marcus. I made mistakes. But this boy, he didn't ask to be born into this. He needs help, and I think someday Jason might be the only one who can give it to him." Jason's breath caught. All the years of willful forgetting, all the arrogance he'd wrapped around his success like armor, it cracked wide open in that moment. He watched his father, a man he thought he understood, wrestle with guilt, vulnerability, hope. And Jason realized he had been wrong, not just about Samantha or Marcus or even the setup. He had been wrong about the story he'd built around himself. He'd always believed he was self-made, untouched by the chaos of other people's lives. But now he saw the truth. He was a product of that chaos, and it had finally come home to collect. Back in the city, everything escalated. When Jason returned to his apartment, he found his door cracked open. He moved cautiously, his instincts alert. Inside, nothing appeared stolen, but the sense of intrusion was undeniable. On his kitchen counter, a single sheet of paper had been left. "You're running out of time. Stop digging, or you'll lose more than your name." Taped to the bottom corner was a photo, this time not of him, or Lisa, or Samantha. It was his daughter, taken from a distance, standing outside her high school. Jason's hands shook as he picked it up. This had gone too far. It wasn't just about old family secrets or business revenge. Someone was threatening his child. And that changed everything. Jason knew he had to confront Samantha. Not in a boardroom. Not with polite words and hidden agendas. He needed answers, real ones. He found her the next morning, waiting in the lobby of his building, as if she knew he'd come looking. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something almost human in her eyes. Regret, maybe. Or fear. "We need to talk," Jason said, and without a word, she followed him up to his office. Inside, the tension felt combustible. Jason laid the photo on the desk. "Is this you? Is this Marcus? Is this part of whatever plan you two have been running?" Samantha's face didn't change, but her eyes flinched just enough for Jason to see the answer. "I didn't know it would go this far," she said finally. "I didn't know they would involve your daughter. That wasn't supposed to happen." Jason leaned in, voice low and furious. "What did you think would happen? You baited me. You staged that moment at the gas station. You manipulated your way into this merger. Why?" Samantha exhaled slowly, like she was deciding how much to finally reveal. "Because Marcus needed a way to get to you. But not to ruin you. Not at first. He wanted you to remember. To face what you left behind. But someone else saw an opportunity. Someone who wants to destroy you completely. And now they're out of control." Jason's mind raced. "Who?" She hesitated, then said a name he hadn't heard in months. Tyler Carr. The compliance officer who'd been fired 6 months ago for breaching confidential data. Jason had assumed the man had moved on. Bitter but harmless. But now it all made sense. Tyler had been close to the financials, the internal systems, and worse, he had a reason to hate Jason. He'd taken the fall for a project that went sideways, one Jason had distanced himself from to protect the company's reputation. Tyler didn't just lose his job, he lost his credibility. Samantha leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. Tyler is the one who's been sending the threats. He found Marcus first. He offered him help, promised him justice. But it's gone off the rails. Tyler wants to burn everything to the ground, and he's using Marcus's pain to do it. Jason was silent for a long moment. Everything was falling apart, his legacy, his relationships, his safety. And now, he was staring down a choice that felt impossible. He could go public with the truth, expose Tyler, admit to everything that had happened, and risk losing his company, his reputation, maybe even his daughter's respect. Or he could do what he'd always done, protect his name, bury the past, play damage control. But this time, people could get hurt. Innocent people. Samantha looked at him. Marcus still wants to believe you're not the man he grew up resenting. But you have to make a choice now. Protect your brand, or protect your people. Jason turned away, staring out the window, the weight of the decision settling heavy in his bones. Outside, the world moved on like nothing was wrong. But inside, he knew everything had changed. There was no clean way out of this. Only hard truths and harder decisions. And somewhere out there, Marcus was still watching. So was Tyler. And time was running out. Jason had barely slept in 2 days. He moved through the city like a man on borrowed time, the faces of people around him blurring together as his mind churned through every detail, every twist, every name that had surfaced. He couldn't trust anyone, not anymore. The photo of his daughter haunted him like a nightmare that refused to fade with daylight. Every instinct told him this wasn't just about Marcus's pain or Tyler Carr's grudge. Something deeper, larger, and far more dangerous was coiling beneath the surface, and Jason was no longer looking at a personal vendetta. He was staring down a full-blown conspiracy that had been hiding in plain sight, and he'd been the centerpiece of it without even knowing. When Samantha told him Tyler had gone rogue, Jason had assumed it was a one-man operation with Marcus as a pawn. But things escalated quickly. That same afternoon, an encrypted file landed in Jason's inbox from an anonymous sender. No message, no subject, just a folder titled ACDULS. He opened it, expecting fake documents or scare tactics, but what he found was far worse. Internal emails, transaction records, security footage, voice memos, a timeline so precise, so deeply researched, it chilled him to the bone. Someone, a group, had been tracking his movements for years. Not weeks. Not months. Years. Business trips, meetings, interactions, even text threads between him and high-level board members. The folder contained information Jason hadn't seen in years, some of it redacted, some of it shockingly clear. This wasn't the work of one angry ex-employee with a stolen hard drive. This was something coordinated. He immediately forwarded the file to Lisa, his assistant, trusting her as the only person left in his orbit who hadn't betrayed him until he got the message. Not from her. From Tyler. A video. Jason opened it with trembling hands, stomach tightening before the first frame even appeared. What he saw made the blood drain from his face. It was Lisa, meeting Tyler in the parking garage beneath their office building, handing him something. A USB. They didn't look like strangers. They didn't look nervous. They looked like colleagues. Like this was routine. And when Lisa leaned in and hugged Tyler, Jason felt his entire world lurch sideways. The betrayal wasn't just shocking. It was personal. Lisa had been with him since the company's founding. She'd sat in on every major decision, coordinated his calendar down to the hour, handled family emergencies, bought birthday presents for his daughter when he forgot. She'd been the one person Jason believed had no reason to turn on him. But clearly, she had motives he'd never seen. Was she feeding information to Tyler from the inside this whole time? Was she part of whatever syndicate was building this operation from the shadows? Jason's phone rang. It was Lisa. He let it ring, then picked it up just as it was about to go to voicemail. Her voice was calm, like nothing had happened. Jason, you need to get out of your office. Now.
What the hell is going on? He snapped.
How long have you been working with him? How long have you been lying to me? I can't explain over the phone. I'll meet you in person. But if you don't leave now, you won't have the chance to ask anything else. The line went dead. Jason bolted. He took the service elevator down, avoiding the lobby, heart pounding with every floor that ticked by. He felt like prey in a place he had once ruled. The building no longer felt like his domain. It felt like a trap. On the street, he saw Lisa pulling up in an unmarked black sedan, passenger door already open. He hesitated just long enough to consider running the other way. But something about her face, shaken but not cold, made him slide into the seat.
Talk, he said.
Lisa didn't look at him. She drove fast, weaving through downtown traffic with terrifying precision. It wasn't supposed to go this far.
I swear.
Tyler reached out to me over a year ago. He said he had proof you were being targeted. Not by him. By people inside your own board. Jason's mind reeled. That makes no sense. They'd lose everything if I go down. No, she said, gripping the wheel tighter. They've already built insurance. If you go down, they've positioned themselves to buy out your shares through a shell firm. You get exposed, the company implodes, and they rebuild it with new branding. They even planted rumors of fraud to accelerate the fallout. That's what Tyler found. He tried to warn you. You didn't listen. So he decided to take matters into his own hands, and I didn't know he'd go this far. Jason couldn't breathe. And Marcus? He's being used, she said, voice softer now. Tyler convinced him that this was the only way to make you feel what he felt. He preyed on the brother you abandoned. He weaponized his pain. The pieces snapped together like a violent puzzle. The merger was never about the deal. Samantha's reappearance, the photos, the emails, they were all meant to destabilize him long enough for the board to execute a hostile removal. But when Tyler lost patience, he turned it into psychological warfare. He took Marcus, broken and angry, and made him a symbol of justice. But the truth was, Tyler didn't want justice. He wanted to burn Jason to the ground. And the people Jason trusted most, the ones he put in place, groomed for leadership, brought into his circle, they had been planning his downfall from the inside. Jason leaned forward, gripping the dashboard, eyes wild. We have to stop this. Before someone gets hurt. Before. It's already too late, Lisa said, her voice suddenly hollow. She turned on the radio. A breaking news alert buzzed through the speakers. Reports just in that an anonymous source has leaked classified financial records from Maven Corp, a Fortune 500 tech firm, to major media outlets. Allegations include money laundering, offshore accounts, and board-level corruption. Federal authorities are investigating. Jason's vision blurred. He wasn't just losing control. He was being erased. Lisa pulled over into a dim alleyway, cut the engine, and turned to him. There's one way out of this. But it's not clean. You go public first. Beat the leak. Confess to what you know, everything, even the parts that make you look guilty. Take the narrative back. You name Tyler. You name the board. You tell the truth, and you let the fallout hit you before it buries you. Or you stay silent. And you disappear. Jason looked at her, stunned. Why are you helping me now? She held his gaze, and for the first time, Jason saw the toll this had taken on her. Because I believed in you. Even when you stopped believing in yourself. I made a mistake trusting Tyler. But I'm not making another one. Jason leaned back, the weight of the moment threatening to crush him. He had built his empire on control, calculation, discipline.
But none of that mattered now.
All he had left was a decision. Truth or survival. Redemption or ruin. And somewhere, watching from the dark, Marcus and Tyler were waiting to see which one he would choose. The night was closing in around Jason, a thick, suffocating fog of secrets and lies pressing down on him as he raced against the clock. The city outside his car window was a blur of neon lights and dark streets, but it felt like he was moving through a tunnel. No matter how fast he went, the walls of his world were closing in on him. He had made his decision. He wasn't going to let it all end in silence. He wasn't going to disappear into the shadows and let them rewrite his life, his name, his legacy. There was too much at stake: his daughter's future, his reputation, and, most haunting of all, the truth that had been buried for too long. Lisa had dropped him off at the edge of the downtown district, the place where everything had started to unravel. He wasn't sure how much he trusted her anymore, but there was no time to second-guess. The moment he stepped into the underground parking garage of the corporate tower, he knew this was it, the final showdown. Tyler Carr had been waiting for this moment, and so had the rest of them. The moment Jason made his move, everything would break wide open. The elevator ride up was agonizingly slow. Each floor passed with a hollow thud, and Jason's heartbeat matched the rhythm of the creaking metal cables. He gripped the handle of the briefcase he'd taken from his office earlier, a piece of evidence he wasn't entirely sure he could trust, but it was the only card he had left. The one piece of the puzzle he had to play in this game, this life-or-death battle. When the elevator doors finally opened, he stepped into the empty, pristine lobby. The polished floors gleamed in the low light, and the silence was deafening. Everything felt too still, too orchestrated. It was almost as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was coming. Jason made his way to the back corridors, the place where the company's most confidential meetings had been held. The room where the deal was supposed to happen. The room where his entire future and everything he'd built would be decided in an instant. He wasn't alone. The door to the conference room swung open as he approached. Standing in the center, illuminated by the stark fluorescent lights, was Tyler Carr, calm, collected, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked more in control than ever, as if he had been expecting this moment for years. But beside him, there was someone else. Jason's stomach dropped as he recognized the figure standing in the shadows. It was Lisa. She was standing next to Tyler, her face hard, expression unreadable. Jason's breath hitched. She had betrayed him again. This was it. She was part of this all along. "You should have stayed out of it, Jason," Tyler said, his voice smooth, almost pitying. "You had the chance to walk away, to save yourself. But now, you're just another casualty of your own arrogance." Jason didn't flinch. His hands were shaking, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He pulled the briefcase open, revealing the contents, the files, the emails, the irrefutable proof of what had been going on behind the scenes. "It's over, Tyler," Jason said, his voice low but unwavering. "I have everything. Your conspiracy. Your lies. You used Marcus. You used Lisa. And you thought you could walk away with everything. But you're wrong. I'm not going down without a fight." Tyler's lips curled into a sly smile. "You still don't get it, do you? It was never about the company. It was never about Marcus or your dirty little secrets. This was always about power. Control. You think the game is just about you, but you're just a pawn. I've been playing this game from the start." Jason's blood ran cold. "You what?
What are you talking about?"
Tyler stepped forward, dropping the act of calm detachment. "You really think you're the only one who's been betrayed, huh? That the only people who've suffered here are you and your precious daughter?" He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I'm not the one who set this in motion, Jason. Someone higher up than both of us did. Someone you've trusted for years. Someone you never even thought to question." Jason froze. 1,000 possibilities exploded in his mind, but none of them made sense.
"Who?"
Tyler's grin widened. "You should have looked closer. Your mentor. Your best friend. Your father's old partner. Victor Blackwell." The name hit Jason like a physical blow. Victor. The man who had taken him under his wing. The man who had taught him everything he knew about business. The man who had been the father figure Jason had never had. The man who had disappeared after the merger. The man who had suddenly reappeared just when Jason needed him most. Everything had been a lie. Jason's mind reeled as the pieces fell into place. Victor had been the architect of the entire scheme. He had been behind the scenes all along, pulling the strings, manipulating everyone: Marcus, Lisa, even Tyler. He had set the trap, knowing Jason's weaknesses and knowing how far Jason would go to protect the people he loved. He had orchestrated everything, the threats, the intimidation, the blackmail. It was all part of his plan to reclaim control of Maven Corp and destroy Jason from the inside out. And Tyler? Tyler had been his tool, his pawn, just like everyone else. Jason's vision blurred as the weight of the betrayal hit him. His hands were shaking now, not with fear, but with rage. His entire life, everything he had built, had been built on lies. Victor had known all along that Jason would never see it coming, that Jason would never suspect the one man he trusted most. He had fed Jason hope, kept him blinded with the illusion of support, only to turn him into a target. "I didn't want this to go this way," Tyler continued, his tone suddenly cold, clinical. "But people like you don't learn unless they lose everything. So now, it's time to say goodbye to your empire, Jason." But Jason wasn't listening. His heart was racing, his thoughts scattered, but one thing was crystal clear. He had to take control back. This wasn't just about fighting for his business anymore. This was about exposing the truth, and exposing Victor for the monster he really was. Without warning, Jason lunged at Tyler, knocking him back against the table. The sound of the struggle echoed in the room, but Jason wasn't thinking about the fight. He was thinking about the truth, about everything he had lost, about how he had been manipulated from the beginning. And then it happened. A door slammed open. Marcus stood in the doorway, his eyes wild, his face red with fury. In his hand, he held a gun unsteady, but aimed directly at Jason. For a moment, time stood still. Jason stared at him, heart pounding. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. But Marcus wasn't looking at Jason. His eyes were on Tyler. "This ends now," Marcus said, his voice breaking, raw with emotion. Before anyone could react, Marcus fired once. The shot rang out, deafening in the silence, and Tyler collapsed to the floor. Jason's heart stopped as he looked at Marcus, the gun still smoking in his hand. And in that instant, Jason realized the most painful truth of all. Marcus had been the final piece of the puzzle all along, not a pawn, but a weapon. The very thing Victor had wanted to use against him. And now the world had changed. The game had shifted. But as Marcus stood there, still holding the gun, Jason understood that there was no going back. This wasn't just a battle for control. It was a battle for their very souls. And for the first time in years, Jason wasn't sure which side would win. The screen faded to black. The story was far from over. The days that followed felt both like a blur and like time had frozen in place. The news of Tyler Carr's death spread quickly, with media outlets spinning half-true headlines faster than Jason could read them. Corrupt tech exec exposed, whistleblower killed in corporate showdown, billionaire CEO involved in internal scandal. Maven Corp's name was everywhere, trending across platforms, debated on podcasts, torn apart on Twitter, dissected on TikTok in 20-second soundbites by creators who didn't know the full story, but believed they did. Jason stayed quiet through it all. For the first time in his adult life, he had nothing to say. The lawyers spoke. The crisis team handled the press. But Jason himself, the man who once crafted narratives like a magician pulling rabbits out of hats, stayed still.
Silent.
Watching the empire he built burn around him, brick by brick. But something strange happened in the aftermath. Not everyone turned against him. Some people, his investors, employees, even a few reporters, began to see the complexity in the story. The leaked documents, the confession from Samantha, the recorded evidence Lisa had finally released, once Marcus agreed to testify in exchange for immunity, began painting a very different picture. Not of a man guilty of greed or cruelty, but of a man trapped inside a machine he didn't even know he was fueling. Jason had made mistakes, massive, life-changing ones, but he wasn't the monster he'd been made out to be. He was something far more human. Flawed, ambitious, prideful, and ultimately forced to face the consequences of running from his past for too long. The board was dissolved. The shell companies were exposed. Victor Blackwell, once revered as a titan of innovation, was arrested in a quiet sting operation at a private estate in Aspen, caught in the very trap he designed for Jason. He offered no resistance, just smiled, as if he knew this day was coming. Jason never saw him again. Never wanted to. That part of his story was over. Lisa disappeared from the public eye completely. No interviews. No memoir. Just silence. Whether she was trying to redeem herself or just escape it all, Jason never found out. And Samantha, in a move no one predicted, started a nonprofit aimed at helping women escape financial abuse in corporate America. She didn't name Jason in her launch statement. She didn't have to. Her actions said enough. She had found her own way to heal. Marcus, for all the chaos he brought, became the one piece Jason couldn't let go of. After everything, after the threats and betrayals and violence, Jason reached out to him, not with lawyers or ultimatums, but with something much harder. A letter. A real one. Handwritten. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't explain. It simply told the truth. About their father. About Jason's mistakes. About how, for the first time, he finally saw Marcus not as a ghost from the past, but as the brother he never let himself believe he deserved. Weeks passed before a reply came. It wasn't long. Just a single sentence. You should have written sooner. Jason read that line 100 times. It hit him harder than any headline, harder than any bullet Tyler had fired in anger. Because buried in that one sentence was every regret, every second of lost time, every chance he didn't take to be better. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A beginning, maybe. Or an end to the silence between them. In the months that followed, Jason stepped down from Maven Corp. Not forced his choice. He could have fought it, clawed his way back like so many others did, but something in him had shifted. Power didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't the badge he wore or the comfort he clung to. It was hollow now, and he was ready to let it go. He kept only one office, small, tucked away, with no title on the door. From there, he started working on something different. Not a company, not a product, but a story. His story. Not the one the media told. Not the one his enemies crafted. The real one. The one that mattered. People still talked, of course. Some said he got away with it. Some said he was ruined. Some said he faked the whole thing for sympathy. The internet never really agreed. But what they didn't see was the man sitting quietly each morning, writing down memories on legal pads, reading letters from his daughter, trying, really trying, to become someone she could be proud of again. The world moved on. As it always does. New scandals. New headlines. New faces to tear down and build back up. But for those who were there, who watched this story unfold from the beginning, who felt every twist, every lie, every truth finally clawing its way to the surface, it stayed with them. Because this wasn't just about betrayal or revenge or business. It was about something deeper. A man facing himself. A mirror turned back on a life built on control, finally cracked just enough to let the light through. And somewhere out there, Marcus still walks his own path. Maybe one day they'll sit across from each other, not as enemies or strangers, but as men trying to piece together what family means after everything's broken. Maybe they won't. But either way, the story has been told. And once the truth is out there, it can't be taken back. Jason once believed power came from what you own, what you build, what you control. Now, he knows the hardest power to hold is the truth. And the hardest thing to earn back is trust. Especially your own. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the Real story begins.